The boy ran into the wrong man on the wrong corner at the wrong hour, and none of it was his fault. It was 11:47 on a Tuesday in February, and the corner of Halsted and 23rd in Chicago was not a corner where small boys appeared alone. Not in February. Not when the wind off the lake could peel the skin from your cheekbones, and the sidewalk was a sheet of gray ice, and the only lights still on belonged to a bar that didn't serve food. The boy was maybe 6, maybe 7. He wore a red parka that was one size too small, no gloves, and sneakers that were wrong for the weather by about 4 months. He was running, and then he stopped running, and he grabbed the sleeve of the first person he reached. That person was Dominic Vrell. Dominic had been walking to his car. He'd been in the bar for 40 minutes. Not drinking, because Dominic hadn't touched alcohol in 11 years, but talking to a man who owed him money, in the specific quiet way that Dominic talked to people who owed him money. The conversation had ended. The matter was resolved. He was walking to his car, and then a small cold hand closed around his wrist. "My mom," the boy said. He wasn't crying yet, but he was close. The way children get when they've been holding it together so long that the sight of an actual adult finally cracks something open. "My mom fell down and she won't. She's on the floor and I don't know what's wrong with her." Dominic looked down at the boy. The boy looked up at Dominic. The boy did not know who Dominic was. He did not know that the man whose sleeve he had grabbed controlled the West Side supply chain for half the contraband that moved through this city. He did not know that 3 men in the last calendar year had said Dominic Vrell's name with fear in their voice, and 2 of those men were now significantly less comfortable than they had been before. He did not know any of this because he was a child, and children do not check credentials when their mothers have fallen. "Show me," Dominic said. The apartment was 4 blocks away and up a stairwell that smelled like mildew and old cooking. The boy, his name was Sam, he said this on the stairs. "I'm Sam," took the steps 2 at a time. Dominic followed. The door was unlocked, the lights were on. The woman was on the kitchen floor between the counter and the small table, and she was breathing, which was the first thing Dominic registered. Breathing, but wrong. Too shallow. Her skin had a grayish color that he'd seen before and didn't like seeing again. She was making dinner, and then she just sat down, Sam said from the doorway, and then she was on the floor. Dominic crouched beside her. He didn't touch her yet. He looked at the counter, a half-opened can of soup, a pot not yet on the stove, a small pharmacy paper bag from Walgreens with the receipt still stapled to it. He looked at her face, late 20s, maybe 30. Dark circles under her eyes that weren't from tonight. He looked at the bag, metformin. The receipt was 3 days old and the bag was still sealed. "Has your mom been sick?" he asked Sam. Sam hugged the doorframe. "She gets tired a lot. She said it was just work." Of course she did. Dominic called 911. He gave the address in the flat, specific way of a man who had given emergency addresses before under worse circumstances. He stayed on the line until the dispatcher confirmed the unit was en route. He did not touch his phone for anything else. Then he sat on the floor of a stranger's kitchen, with his back against the cabinets, and he watched Sam watch his mother breathe, and he waited. Her name was Petra Cross. He learned this from the paramedics, who learned it from the insurance card in her wallet, which Sam retrieved from her purse with the solemn efficiency of a child who had done this before. Found things his mother needed, handed them to adults, stood back and tried not to be in the way. Dominic did not ride in the ambulance. He had no reason to ride in the ambulance. He was nobody to this woman, a stranger from a street corner, a pair of arms that had held her son's shoulder on the stairs while the boy shook. He stood on the sidewalk outside the building and watched the ambulance pull away and told himself that was the end of it. He'd done what anyone would do. He'd called for help. He'd stayed until help came. That was it. That was the full extent of his obligation to Petra Cross and her son. Sam was in the ambulance. Dominic got in his car. He drove 3 blocks north, stopped at a red light, and sat there. The light turned green. He sat there. A car behind him honked. He turned right, circled the block, and drove to Northwestern Memorial. He told himself it was because of the boy. That was a reasonable thing to tell himself. The boy was alone. The boy was 6 or 7 and had no gloves and had grabbed the sleeve of a stranger because there was no one else. And that meant something. Not about Dominic, not about his choices or his history or the particular shape of the life he'd built. It meant something about the boy. So he went to the hospital for the boy. He sat in the emergency waiting room for 40 minutes with a cup of coffee he didn't drink and a magazine he didn't read. The waiting room had fluorescent lights and a television playing a home renovation show on mute, and a family in the corner speaking quietly in Spanish. Dominic sat with his elbows on his knees and his coat still on and his hands folded, and he did not look like a man who belonged in waiting rooms, and he knew it, and he didn't move. Sam found him. The boy came out of the double doors with a nurse, looked across the waiting room, and his face did the thing that children's faces do when they see the one person they recognize. It didn't exactly relax, but it restructured itself around something slightly less like terror. They said she's going to be okay, Sam said, stopping in front of him. She has something called, the nurse said a word, I can't say it, but they said her blood sugar was really low and that's why she fell. Hypoglycemia, Dominic said. Sam blinked. Yeah, that? Does your mom know she has diabetes? Sam was quiet for a second. She said she didn't have time to go to the doctor. Dominic looked at the boy. He thought about the sealed bag from Walgreens, the 3-day-old receipt, the prescription that hadn't been opened. She didn't have time, he said. Not a question. She works a lot. Sam said it without complaint, just fact. She works at the diner on Cermak in the mornings and she does the bookkeeping thing at night, on her laptop. She doesn't get home until 11 sometimes. 11. The boy had been alone. Dominic did not say anything about that. Can I wait with? Sam asked. Dominic looked at the boy. The boy looked back at him with the specific expression of a child who had already been told no too many times today and was braced for one more. Sit down, Dominic said. Petra Cross came out of the treatment area 2 hours later. He knew it was her from the way Sam bolted out of the chair beside him. Dominic had somehow ended up explaining to this child the structural differences between a baseball and a softball, which had not been on his agenda for the evening, but Sam had asked and Dominic had answered, and ran across the waiting room, and the woman caught him with both arms the way mothers catch children when they've been scared and are trying not to show how scared. She was wearing a hospital bracelet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that had been neat this morning, and wasn't anymore. She was pale and she had an IV bruise on the inside of her arm that she'd already pulled the sleeve down to cover, and she held Sam for a long moment before she pulled back to look at his face. Then she looked up and saw Dominic. He watched her register him, the coat, the size of him, the fact of him in this waiting room, and he watched her trying to figure out what he was. She settled, he could tell, on something complicated, not exactly suspicion, more like the careful calculation of a woman who had learned to assess strangers quickly and accurately. You're the one who called 911, she said. Your son found me. I know. She glanced down at Sam, then back up. He told me. There was a pause in which Dominic could have said something easy and she could have thanked him, and they both could have ended this right here in this waiting room and never seen each other again. Thank you, she said. I mean it. You should fill the prescription, he said. She went very still. He nodded toward the inside of her arm, the sleeve she'd pulled down. The metformin. It was still in the Walgreens bag. 3 days she looked at him for a moment, and the look was not warm. I was going to. Tonight would have been worse than tonight, he said. If you'd filled it. She held his gaze for another second, and he could see her deciding whether to be angry. She was tired enough that angry required more energy than she had. She looked away first. I know, she said quietly. I know. Sam tugged her sleeve. He knows what hypoglycemia is, he reported, as though this was a significant credential. And the baseball thing. Petra looked down at her son, and something shifted in her expression. The careful calculation softened into something that wasn't for public consumption. She tucked his hair back from his face. Good, she said. That's good, Sam. She didn't have a ride home. He found this out because he overheard her asking a nurse about cab fare, and what ride shares were still running at this hour. And the nurse was giving her the kind of helpfully useless information that people give when they don't know the actual answer. Dominic waited until she was done being helpfully useless before he said anything. I can drive you, Petra turned. You don't have to do that, I know. She studied him again with that particular measuring look. I don't know you, Dominic Vrell. She didn't recognize the name. He registered this, not with relief exactly, but with something adjacent to it. I'm not going to tell you you're safe with me, he said, because he was not actually in the business of lying to women on their worst nights. I'm going to tell you that you look like you can't afford a cab, you have a kid, and I'm already going to your neighborhood. He was not in fact going to her neighborhood. She knew he was lying. He could tell she knew. She looked at Sam, who was leaning on her arm with the heavy, implicit weight of a child who was running on fumes and goodwill and would be asleep in 4 minutes in any horizontal surface. Okay, she said. The ride was quiet. Sam was asleep before they hit the first red light. He'd climbed into the back seat and curled against the door the way children curl, completely, unself-consciously, like sleep is not a surrender but just the next thing happening to the body, and was out. Petra sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap and looked at the city going by. She didn't make small talk. He didn't either. The streetlights moved over her face in intervals. Orange, dark, and she watched them. The diner on Cermak, he said. She looked at him. Your son said that's where you work mornings. He talks a lot. He was scared, Dominic said. Scared kids talk. She was quiet for a moment. He's been doing that since his dad left, filling the silence. She said it without self-pity, just information. He does it so I don't feel the quiet. Dominic looked at the road. He's good at it, he said. He's too good at it. She pressed her fingers together in her lap. He's 7. He shouldn't be good at taking care of people yet. Dominic thought about that. He didn't say anything back, because there wasn't anything to say that would make it less true. She directed him to the building. He had not, in fact, been going anywhere near here, and he pulled up to the curb. She reached to wake Sam, and Dominic said, "I'll carry him," before he'd thought about saying it, and she stopped. She didn't say yes. She also didn't say no. He carried Sam up the same stairs he'd climbed 2 hours ago, and the boy did not wake up. At the door, Petra got her key out and opened the apartment, and they went into the kitchen, which now had a slightly surreal quality. The soup can still on the counter. The pot, the ordinary catastrophe of a Tuesday night, paused and then resumed. He put Sam on the couch. The boy made a small sound and didn't wake. Petra stood in the kitchen doorway. She had one hand on the frame and she was looking at her son, and for a moment Dominic saw it. The layer under the careful calculation, the thing she'd been holding together since 11:47 on a Tuesday. The fear, the sheer weight of doing all of this alone. Then she got herself back. "You can go," she said. She said it without rudeness, just directness. "I'm fine from here, the prescription," he said. "I'll fill it tomorrow." "Tonight," he said. "There's a 24-hour Walgreens on Michigan." She looked at him. "It's midnight. I know. You don't have to. The bag is on your counter," he said. "Get the slip." "I'll wait." She stood there for a moment, and he could see her deciding whether to fight this one, and he could see the moment she decided not to, because she was 30 years old and exhausted, and the slip was in fact on her counter. She got the slip. They drove to the Walgreens and she filled the prescription, and he paid for it before she got to the register, which she was angry about. "I have money," she said. "I know you do. Then why?" "Because you already had a hard enough Tuesday," he said. "Let it go." She stood in the fluorescent light of the pharmacy aisle and held the paper bag and looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Not gratitude. Not anger either. Something between them, something more complicated than either. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Actually, not the polite answer. Dominic thought about that. He thought about Sam's hand on his sleeve on the corner of Halsted and 23rd. The total certainty with which the boy had grabbed him. Not asking, not begging, just taking hold, as though it had not yet occurred to him that a stranger might not come. "Your kid grabbed me," he said, "and I couldn't put him down." She looked at him for a long moment. "That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in about 6 months," she said. He didn't smile. He almost did. "Take the medication," he said. "First dose tonight." He didn't see her for 9 days. He told himself this was correct and appropriate. He had helped. The situation was resolved. Petra Cross was functional, medicated, and capable. Sam was in school, presumably everything was fine. He went about his work, which was specific and required his full attention, and did not think about Cermak or the woman who worked 2 jobs and had a son who filled the silence, and a sealed bag from Walgreens that had sat on her counter for 3 days because she didn't have time. He thought about it constantly. On the 9th day he drove past the diner on Cermak at 7 in the morning and saw her through the window, moving between tables, and she didn't see him, and he didn't stop. On the 10th day he stopped. He sat at the counter. She came to take his order and stopped when she saw him, and a range of things moved through her face in quick succession. "You drove past yesterday," she said. He hadn't known she'd seen him. "How's the boy?" he said. "Sam." She said it with a slight emphasis. "He's good. He asks about you." "What does he ask?" "If you're coming back." She set a coffee cup in front of him and filled it, and she didn't look at him while she did it. I didn't know what to tell him. Dominic wrapped his hand around the coffee cup. "What do you need?" he said. She looked up. "What practically? What do you actually need?" He said it plainly, without performance, the way he asked about everything, not the polite answer. She stood there with the coffee pot in her hand, and the morning light coming through the diner window, and she looked at him for a long moment, and he thought she was going to tell him to leave, that she was handling it, that she didn't need anything from a man she'd met 9 days ago in an emergency room. Instead, she said, "I need someone to pick Sam up on Thursdays. I have a bookkeeping client meeting that runs late, and my neighbor. She used to help, but she moved in December, and I haven't figured out the Thursday problem yet." She said it like it was small, like it was embarrassing. "What school?" he said. She blinked. "Lincoln. On 26th. What time?" 3:15. He nodded once. "I'll be there Thursday." "You don't?" Petra had. She stopped. "Let me do the Thursday problem," he said. She looked at him for a long time. Then she set the coffee pot down and picked up her notepad. "What do you want for breakfast?" she said. The Thursday problem became Thursday. Sam, it turned out, had opinions. About everything, delivered in the ongoing monologue of a child who had been waiting for an audience. About his teacher, who was fair but laughed too loud. About a book his class was reading that he'd already finished. About whether the best pizza in Chicago was deep dish or thin crust, which was a question he took seriously and expected Dominic to take seriously as well. Dominic took it seriously. They had the thin crust versus deep dish conversation on 3 separate Thursdays before Sam concluded that the correct answer was deep dish for eating in the city and thin crust for everywhere else, and that this distinction mattered and should not be blurred. Dominic did not tell the boy he was wrong. He told Petra about this on the 4th Thursday, standing in the kitchen while she set out plates for dinner, and she laughed. Actually laughed, not the polite version she gave customers at the diner. And the sound was sudden enough that Dominic stopped talking for a second. He's been workshopping that theory for 2 weeks, she said. He tried it out on my mom on FaceTime and she didn't engage seriously enough and he's still annoyed about it. He's right about the thin crust, Dominic said. Petra gave him a sideways look. Don't encourage him. I'm not encouraging him. I'm agreeing with him. There's a difference. She turned back to the counter with a smile she was trying not to show him, and something settled in the apartment that had not been there before. Something that was not quite calm and not quite anything else. Sam appeared in the kitchen doorway. Are you staying for dinner? Dominic looked at Petra. Petra looked at the pot on the stove. There's enough, she said. She said it plainly, without particular warmth, which he was beginning to understand was how she offered things that mattered to her. Yes, Dominic said. He told his associate Marcus on a Wednesday that there were certain parts of his schedule on Thursdays that were not available for meetings. Marcus, who had worked with Dominic for 7 years and was not a man who asked unnecessary questions, said got it and adjusted the calendar and did not bring it up again. What Dominic did not say, what he would not have known how to say, was that the Thursday problem had rearranged something in the architecture of his week, that the other days had started to be the days he got through so that Thursday came around again, that he had, without planning it, begun to hold open a version of himself that didn't exist in meeting rooms or parking garages, or conversations where money was the subject and the subtext was fear, that Sam had drawn him a picture. It was a picture of a man in a coat, Dominic, presumably, rendered in the artistic style of a 7-year-old who was better at people than at coats, standing next to a boy and a woman, and all 3 of them were standing in front of a building, and there was snow on the ground because Sam had been there in February. And that's when he'd decided this picture happened. And the man in the coat had his arms at his sides, but you could tell, somehow, from the way Sam had drawn the angle of the shoulders, or the way he'd placed the figures close together, or something else entirely, that he was not leaving. Dominic had put the picture in the inner pocket of his coat. Petra found out who he was in March. He knew from the sound of the apartment when he came on Thursday. A different kind of quiet, the kind that's been held. Sam met him at the door and his face had the specific careful blankness of a child who has been told things and has decided to have no opinion about them until further notice. Petra was in the kitchen. She had a mug in her hands she wasn't drinking from. You could have told me, she said when she heard him stop in the doorway. What would I have told you? She looked up. Her eyes were direct the way they always were, but there was something tight in the line of her jaw. That you're not someone I can have around, Sam. He was quiet. Is it true? She asked. What I read. It depends what you read, Dominic. She said his name with a weight that meant she was past the part where she was polite about things. Just tell me what's true. He stood there in the kitchen doorway and thought about that. He thought about the version of himself that would have given her a smooth answer right now, the diplomatic management of information that had served him well in every context that mattered. He thought about Sam's picture in his coat pocket. Most of it, he said. What you read, most of it's true. Petra looked at the table. She set her mug down carefully. Sam asked me this morning if you were his friend, she said. He didn't say anything. He said. She stopped. She pressed her fingers flat on the table. He said you're the kind of person you can count on. He learned that word from somewhere, count on, and he used it about you and I didn't know what to say to him. What did you say? I said I was still figuring it out. She looked up. I'm still figuring it out. Dominic came into the kitchen. He sat down at the table. The same table he'd sat at on a dozen Thursdays now, the one with the scratch on the corner that Sam had made with a Lego and Petra had never gotten around to sanding down, and he folded his hands and looked at her. I can't unmake what I am, he said. I'm not going to tell you I can. But I can tell you that I have not once been dishonest with you, and I can tell you that your son is the safest person in any room I'm in. She was quiet. That's not nothing, he said. No, she said, it's not. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere down the hall, Sam's door was open, and they could both hear him doing something with blocks, the quiet stacking sound of construction. He needs new sneakers, Petra said finally. He keeps telling me his feet are fine and I can see his toes pressing through the front of the left one. Dominic looked at her. Just, if you're going to be around, she said, She wasn't looking at him. He'd let you take him. He doesn't fight it the same way with you. He understood what she was not saying. That this was not the same as saying yes, that this was the first step in figuring it out, which took longer and required more and meant something real. Saturday, he said. We can go Saturday. She nodded. He stayed for dinner. And when he left that night, the picture was still in his coat pocket. And the building in Sam's drawing had 3 figures standing close together in the snow. And Dominic walked to his car and sat in it for a moment without starting the engine. He thought about a corner in February. A small cold hand on his wrist. The way certainty looks when a child still has it, when it hasn't yet occurred to them that the person they reach for might not be the right one, might not stay, might not be safe to reach for at all. He thought about Sam not knowing those things yet. He put the car in drive. He was not going to be the reason Sam learned them.